Haggai is one of the Bible's lesser-known prophets. Do you know how many chapters there are in Haggai? 2. It can be narrowed down, his prophecy can be narrowed down to a 3 or 4 month period between August and December of 520 BC. Even though it was a short period, there is something important that he had to say to the people of his day and as well to us. Haggai was a post-exilic prophet who preached to the people of Judah after the return from the exile in Babylon. Judah's name given to the southern kingdom. Remember, they split, and we had the northern kingdom that was made up of 10 tribes, and then we had the southern kingdom that was made up of 2. And it's either the southern kingdom, as we go into Advent, you will see, is the branch of where Jesus and David goes through. Judah and Benjamin make up the southern kingdom. Judah existed around to about 586 BC when the Babylonians destroyed the temple in Jerusalem and deported a majority of those citizens over the next several years. The people of Judah remained in exile until about 538 when the Persians conquered the Babylonians. And for whatever reasons, King Cyrus looked favorably among the Jewish people and gave them permission to return to Jerusalem and even agreed to finance the rebuilding of the temple. In addition to that, he restored to the Jews the temple vessels of silver and gold that the Babylonians had plundered. Though the Jews were appreciative of what the Persians had done, they were still not free. They remained subjects under the Persian Empire. So this is the context in which Haggai is preaching and prophesying. Upon their return, the people made a half-hearted attempt to clear the temple foundations, but they soon lost interest and instead went to work on their own houses. And honestly, who could blame them? Life was not easy for them, even though they were back in their country. Judah and Jerusalem were pretty bleak economically. Jerusalem was still largely in ruins, and the temple was a tall pile of rubble. Rebuilding that temple was a daunting task. In addition, it was a daily struggle for those who returned from exile just to get enough food to eat. The harsh reality of the daily existence occupied most of their time and energy. And by the time the prophet Haggai comes on the scene, it's been 18 years, and the people had settled into their routine. For 18 years, they had gone about their affairs, getting their houses in order, while that temple remained laying in ruins. Haggai's message was very clear and to the point. He says to the people there, your priorities are out of whack. Earlier, a couple of verses ahead of what we read this morning, this is what Haggai said. Take a good hard look at your life. Think it over. You have spent a lot of money, but you haven't much to show for it. You keep filling your plates, but you never get filled up. You keep drinking and drinking and drinking, but you're always thirsty. You put on layer after layer of clothes, but you can't get warm. And the people who work for you, what are they getting out of it? Not much. A leaky, rusted out bucket. That's what. Haggai's prophecy was to remind them that their priorities were wrong. They had procrastinated and kept saying it wasn't the right time to build the temple. We don't have time to do that. We don't have the money. They walked by it daily and they ignored it. Even after time, I guess I didn't even notice it very much. It's like, where's Jeanette? Is she in here? It's like my patches that are still on the wall that I see and yet don't see. I wonder in some way, is it some way a metaphor about their relationship with Yahweh? They were too busy. They couldn't repair it. They walked past it, but didn't even really notice. In verses 3 and 4, we read this. Shortly after that, God said more, and Haggai spoke it. How is it that it's the right time for you to live in your fine new homes while the home of God's temple is in ruins? The people listened to the prophet, and within 5 years, the temple was completed. It was not as grand or elaborate as the original temple, but the people had a place, a sacred place, or sacred space in which to worship the Lord. Now, I don't want the irony to be lost on us here. Back in the glory days of the first temple, the people were chided for relying too much on temple attendance and religious priorities while ignoring the weightier matters of justice and mercy. The prophet Jeremiah said these words, "Amend your ways and your doings. Do not trust in these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord." If Haggai had lived back then, he probably would have agreed with Jeremiah, but Haggai lived in a very different time under very different circumstances. The people in Jeremiah's day, before they got conquered and everything went bad, were taking the temple for granted, treating it like a good luck charm. The people of Haggai's day were acting as if God had little importance in their lives. The focal point of their living lay in ruins, and it did not seem to matter to them, and maybe what's even worse, it didn't seem to bother them. Haggai's message to them is direct and to the point. Rebuild the temple. It needs to take precedent over everything else. You see, as I have listened to this passage, as I dealt with it, I think there's more at stake here than simply finishing a building, a place to worship. I think what has happened is that people have forgotten to honor God, Yahweh. They have forgotten their covenant. They've forgotten who they were and to whom they belong. They were more concerned about what they needed and wanted rather than paying attention to the relationships that mattered, to the relationship that was most important, their relationship with the Almighty. And so here's where I got this. As I was reading commentaries, one person said, the people have forgotten the importance of sacred space. The people have forgotten the importance of sacred space. They have forgotten the importance of a place that you can go to experience the mystery of the divine, the presence of God. You see, it wasn't about the buildings, and it wasn't about how it was constructed, its size or its grandeur. It was about a place where they could go and experience and be reminded that God abided with them, that God had not abandoned them, that God had not forgotten them, that God had not forsaken them. It was about a sacred space, a holy space, a space set apart where they could go and worship and honor and praise the one that gives life abundant and eternal. I have a new appreciation for Kathleen and her service that she calls Sacred Space at 8 o'clock on Sunday mornings. It doesn't always happen here, and it happens out there, but we experience God's presence here. Being here allows us to focus on the right things so that we can embrace all that God wants for us. So I kind of expanded this whole idea of sacred space, and here's what I want to throw at you. How are people in our community experiencing sacred space here on this campus? Not just on Sundays, but on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, not just at 9:45 in the morning, perhaps 6 or 7 at night, or 6 or 7 in the morning. How are we lifting up a place that offers sacred space here in this area? You see, I think too often we judge and measure our success and failures by our numbers, instead of by the faithfulness we exhibit in our lives. So as I've been dealing with this, I've been thinking that maybe success is more about how we are helpful to folks around us, how we can help them encounter the goodness of God, to experience God's grace and peace and love, and not try to drag them in here on Sunday mornings. Maybe it's more about how we help folks get through the day, to put food on their table and seek justice for themselves and others. Maybe it's about how we treat those who use our buildings, who bring their children to play on our playground and who walk their dogs and ride their bikes. Maybe it's being more intentional about how we offer up this place as a sacred space in the midst of this neighborhood. When we first came to Pine Shores, that is when Bruce and I first came to Pine Shores some 19 years ago, about a couple years after we'd been here, we did, I don't know if any of you remember we did that study, that program that was entitled Natural Church Development. Do any of you guys remember doing that? I remember meeting over there, so I think it was pretty early on. And that is a program to help with church growth and evangelism based on, which I really like, the needs of the community. What they stressed is, okay, so don't go out and create all these programs and think people will come. Go out into the neighborhood and see what the needs of the neighborhood are. See what the needs are for this neighborhood. And build your programming around that. I don't remember the name of the presenter, but I do remember something that she said that has stuck with me all these years. She looked at me and she says, you know, God has blessed this church with an amazing campus. And then she looked at me and she said, God has plans for y'all here. Sacred space. God told Haggai that God would shake all the nations so that their treasure would come and furnish the new temple, and the people were to continue to build. Maybe the treasure that God gives to us here at Pine Shores, maybe our treasure is the people who come here. Maybe our treasure is the school and the AAs and the Boy Scouts. Maybe our treasure is Joy Company and the choirs. Maybe our treasure is Michael Saunders. Maybe our treasure is the rehabilitation facility that often brings the patients here, wheels them down here so that they can enjoy some peace. They can see green grass. You see, maybe we have been gifted with opportunities to create sacred space where folks can come here and sit and be and play and laugh and pray and light candles, to go to worship. Maybe this is a place that people can encounter God in community. For just a short period of time, 3 to 4 months,